Well, good morning. Only 1 hour left till food. Yes. All right. Well, I am from Nassau Bay Baptist Church, and I guess I'll just tell you a real quick thing about that church that's kind of neat. It's across the street from the Johnson Space Center. It's across the street from NASA. So our church is made up of a bunch of NASA engineers, or as I call them, NASA nerds. We don't have a lot of hand raising in our church because if they did, pocket protectors and pens would go flying, people would lose eyes, it would be a horrible thing. My husband's always said that, it's hard to get our people to worship. And I said, you got to consider who's out there, honey. Pocket protectors. So that's our church. Yes, we're from Houston, Texas. I'm actually originally from Portland, Oregon. And I did grow up an atheist and became a believer at the age of 20. But several years into my faith, about 7 years we've figured now, I was a young minister's wife, youth minister, and music minister's wife. If you didn't catch that, youth minister's wife and music minister's wife. I didn't have two husbands. I was actually married to the guy that did both jobs. And about that time in my life, I doubted what I believed, what I had done when I was 20. Now, why I'm sharing this with you before I get into my topic? Well, there's two reasons I'm super excited to be here in New Mexico with you. The first reason is that I was encouraged to do apologetics while I was out here at Glorieta. It was the first time I had a leader in the Christian faith say, no, you're doing the right thing. Keep doing what you're doing. We need that. We need people to defend the faith. And I was encouraged greatly out here in New Mexico. Kind of caught a fire for it. The other reason I wanted to share with you that I doubted my faith and why I'm super excited I'm here, not because I doubted my faith, but because when I doubted my faith, I wanted to find answers to those questions. I was like, why? What have I done? I was an atheist. Do I really believe that there's a real God and I can really know him? Do I really believe that the Bible is God's word? How do I know that? Do I know that Jesus rose from the dead? Am I just saying that? How do I know these things? And when I went looking for answers, I found a book, and it was about this big. And at the time, I was a band director working 70-hour weeks in the public schools. And I didn't have time for a book this big that was saying things like metaphysical in it. I didn't know what metaphysical was at the time, and I didn't have time to go look up every other word that I was reading. So I thought, I got to find something to answer my questions. And you know where I landed? Was Lee Strobel's Case for Christ. In fact, I was telling him last night, you're responsible for this mess that I'm in, doing all this speaking and apologetics and defending the faith. Because of your books, I started reading the people you interviewed, and I started reading their debates. I started watching them, and I started reading the arguments against faith, and then the rebuttals to those. And after finding good answers for my own questions, I went back to the church and thought, I bet there's people in the church that have the same questions I had. And so my husband and I began to teach apologetics in our church. Well, several years later, actually not even several years, just a few years later, I found a degree program in apologetics at Biola University. And I went and got a degree from all those guys that I was already reading. It was awesome. Well, I started a blog as a result of that degree program. I started a blog just to defend the resurrection and see if I could defend it well. And out of that blog came people saying, hey, could you come teach us how to do that? And could you come talk to us about how to defend our faith? And so now I'm here with you. Now that was kind of the short version, right? That's not the big, long version of it. But I wanted to let you know that New Mexico is special to me, not only because this is where I was greatly encouraged to be an apologist, but also because I'm here for the first time meeting Lee Strobel. And he was the one that really started this up for me in his work. All right. So today, what am I going to talk about? I have this weird title called An Open Dialogue with an Atheist. And so you probably think as a Christian, I'm going to tell you, here's how to dialogue with atheists. Well, I thought we'd have some fun and we would actually look at what an atheist has to say about dialoguing with atheists. But before I do that, I think you have a video for me.
the Bible says you will be separated from God forever. If you're trusting in Muhammad or Buddha or Krishna or Joseph Smith or Mary or the Eucharist, friends, to be redeemed, there's no other name under heaven. There's no other way. There's no other truth. There's no other life outside of the blood that Jesus Christ shed. That's why he went to the cross, so that he could tell you and show you and prove to you when he came back from the grave how good he is. Good, thank you.
Hey, I just want to let you know you're really bothering everybody that's out here, and it's really offensive what you're saying. I just like to speak for everybody out here.
Me?
I am. I absolutely, because you're judging
being
people.
intolerant.
So what I would like to say
anybody.
is I'd like to say let's just
I
tone it down.
Anybody.
Your statement, do not judge,
Sure.
you're judging. You see, you are actually making a judgmental statement. And what is called, it's a logical fallacy. Your statement has committed suicide in and upon itself.
I'm not listening. You're making no sense.
you're
I don't even
actually-
understand what you're saying. So did we decide that we're going to stop preaching? Did we decide that we're going to stop or we're going to continue? Because I would like to tell you what it feels like to be preached at. How would you like that? To be told that you're intolerant, what you're saying is wrong?
Law of non-contradiction would say that only one thing can be true. You can't have two things saying they're true and contradict each other. It's impossible.
That's true to you.
No.
But you're up here telling other
I said-
people, Muslims, you're telling
He
atheists,
thinks rules
you're
of
telling
logic
Jews.
are insane. He told me
No,
I
I'm
was
saying that your
when
book is insane.
I gave,
well, if you
I like
continue,
it.
I'm going to preach at you guys, so that
can
you know what it
preach
feels
to me.
like.
You
You
can
want me to
preach
preach to you?
Well, I don't want you to right now. I'm trying to
that
preach a
you're
message right
telling
now
us
of love and
not to
forgiveness
do.
and grace and mercy.
No, you're teaching a message of intolerance and hate.
Are you kidding me?
Have a dialogue.
Jesus Christ went to the
Can you
cross and
dialogue?
suffered. Muhammad never went to the cross and suffered. Muhammad is still in the grave. You got to realize that Christ fulfilled hundreds of prophecies to prove that he is actually God in the flesh.
Why is your microphone on?
So I'm preaching. I'm here to preach.
Oh, you're preaching.
I'm
Okay.
a preacher.
So you're preaching. Let me preach to you.
You can.
How's
if you'd
that?
like.
We good? Okay.
Yeah, you can if you'd like.
I preach the good news of Richard Dawkins and the God delusion. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it. A petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak. A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser. A misogynist. Homophobic, racist, genocidal,
2 weeks or something.
sadomasochist, a malevolent bully. That is what your God preaches. You are intolerant. You are a hater.
Lie to your government.
Why is your religion hating on everyone else? How does it feel to be preached at? How does it feel to be told that you're intolerant, that you're misogynist, that you're a homophobe? How does that feel?
Not one.
It's terrible. Quit telling us that we're wrong. Thank you.
No one is righteous. No, not one. So you can search.
All right, so that's what we don't want to see out there. We want to avoid situations like this. It's very hostile, right? It got very, very confrontational. And I think we can avoid this. I think we can have open dialogue with our atheist friends. And to show you this, I'm going to use a site from an article from an atheist website. The article is called "How to Convert Atheists." Okay, this was not it. This was not a good example on either side of the dialogue. But I want to share with you a little bit about what this atheist has to say about how you can dialogue with people. You can find the article on Common Sense Atheism's website, and the author is Luke Muehlhauser. Let's look at what his main points are that really resonated with me. The first one, he said, was to be realistic. Okay? As you saw in the video, we got two people come at each other with very different worldviews, and they're very well established in what they believe. So we got to understand that when we come to people, when we go to talk to them about Jesus Christ, we don't know if they're ready to receive the gospel. We might come across a guy like the religious antagonist, right? So we got to find a way to dialogue with people. And in dialoguing with them, we got to remember to be realistic. Not everybody's ready to receive the message. That doesn't mean we just have to walk away. We can still have some fun. Okay? We can still have some good dialogue. So he says, be realistic. This is this atheist again. Be realistic. Not everybody's going to be ready. You know, a lot of them are pretty entrenched in what they believe. And the second point that he made, it really hit home with me because it reminds me of my father. Every time I would leave the house, my dad would say, Mary Jo, have fun, and don't do anything stupid. Okay? You may have said this to your own kids. And the atheist's comment was, his other how to convert atheists was, don't be stupid. What does he mean by that? Well, look at the quote. He says, persuading atheists is kind of like picking up chicks. You're 80% of the way there if you just avoid the really big mistakes that most people make. Most of what you have to do is just not be stupid. All right. Now, I don't know much about picking up chicks. Really don't. But I do know that there are a lot of good points that he's making about some of the mistakes we make when we're trying to have a conversation with an unbeliever. So let's see what some of these are that he says. First of all, things not to do, okay? Don't tell atheists what they think. Do not tell them what they think. A lot of times when we get into the defense of the faith, we start gaining a knowledge of other beliefs or of atheism, and we start going, oh, I know what you think. Okay, you come across your atheist friend, you want to tell them, I know your arguments. Okay, you don't, because you don't know what they know, right? You're not inside their mind. You don't know what they've studied, or if they're just repeating something they've heard. So don't tell atheists what they think. That's really important. Don't evade serious questions. If somebody asks you a difficult question, like how could you say God's good when I see so much evil in the world? Okay, or when I had a lady say, you know, how can you say God's good when he took my best friend of 42 years, my husband, he just took him all of a sudden from me. How can you say he's good? Those are serious questions that need answers. And in that instance, we need to walk alongside them and be there for them and help them answer their questions. But we shouldn't evade when a serious question is asked. Don't assert things you can't defend. Okay, maybe you've started to gain a little knowledge. Don't start asserting arguments that you haven't studied and that you don't know. Okay, that's not a good thing to do. That shows a lack of integrity. What are some good things to do? He says to explore the truth openly. You see, atheists need to know that you actually care about them. Not just getting a notch on your I led another person to Christ belt. Okay? They need to know that you're open to discussing whatever the truth is. And you're open to that because you really, really care about them as a person. Okay? So they need to know that. You need to be open to exploring the truth with them. So they may ask you some really hard things that are uncomfortable for you. You need to be able to admit mistakes. Oh my goodness. Like I could stay on this one all night. You know, I've done 2 public formal debates with Muslims, and I made mistakes in those debates. And they're on YouTube for, what's the old saying, God and everybody to see, right? So I have to be able to admit when I'm wrong, or it's a bad witness to another person if you can't say, you know what? You're right, I'm wrong. But that's one of the ones that we struggle with the most right there. Is just being able to say to a person, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. But that has a huge witness when we're speaking a defense of the faith. Look at that third one, come prepared. This is an atheist. He wants you to actually come knowing what you know. He wants you to know your faith. If you can know his arguments, he wants you to know that too. We'll look at that a little bit later, but he really wants you to know what you believe and why you believe it, so you come prepared to talk to him. Okay? Come prepared. I want to know what you know, Christian. And then gently point out flaws in the atheist's reasoning. Gently. Did you see in the video, I don't know if you could hear it real well, but there was a moment when the religious antagonist was going after those street preachers, and one guy was saying, well, you know what? This guy doesn't even believe in logic, you know, and the guy's looking at him going, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know what you're saying. Okay, the atheist was like, I don't even know what you're saying. So now we're not having a dialogue. We're just talking at each other. Okay, and that's what I saw in there. The gentleman who was the Christian pointing out a logical problem in the atheist argument was actually saying something true, but the message didn't come across because it wasn't done gently. It wasn't done with respect. Okay, so what you saw up there was quite antagonistic on both sides. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn 4 elements of what makes a good open dialogue with an atheist. Now, it is my sincere hope, I'm not teaching you anything amazing or brand new in your life, but that these things are a grand reminder of what you should be doing already. And I hope that that's what you get. The words that you can't see because they're white on the screen. Kind of got a polar bear in a snowstorm going on up here. The white words are know, question, listen. I'm sorry, not in that order. Know, listen, question, and respond. So those are the 4 elements. Know, listen, question, and respond. And if we get those 4 elements in our conversation, we're going to improve our dialogue with atheists immensely, immensely. Okay, so the first area is know. Christians should be able to clearly state Christian beliefs. Clearly state them. If you need to practice, then practice them. Before a mirror, you can say them to the TV, the man on TV, whatever you want to do. But be able to clearly state what you believe. And there's 2 areas I think we should be able to know as we're talking to people. We should be able to tell a person why I believe in God. Okay, that's from 1 Peter 3:15, and you heard Lee Strobel last night talk about that. Always be prepared to give that reason for the hope that is in you. And Peter's talking to a bunch of persecuted Christians. They're being persecuted, and he's saying you still need to be prepared to defend what you believe. He's not saying, hey, you might want to know what you believe so you can tell your buddy at work. Okay? These guys are being persecuted for their faith, and he said, if anybody asks you, you need to set apart Christ as Lord, realizing he is God. He's holy. He's the one in control, and then be ready to give that answer. And then the second part is, what do I believe about God? As you hopefully heard in James Walker's presentation, we have some fundamental disagreements with other belief systems. And you can find these out by knowing what you believe about God, and then you can compare them to what another person says about God. So it's important to know things like essential Christian doctrines, such as the resurrection, the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, the virgin birth, the death on the cross. These are essential Christian doctrines, the nature of God, the nature of man. And the attributes of God. This is where people start to go astray from Christianity and the attributes of God. Okay, who is God? Did he become Jesus Christ? Did he become a man? This is where we start to differ. These are things we have to know. Do you know the attributes of God? That he's omnibenevolent, omnipresent, all those omni words, right? That we kind of go, wow, those are huge. We should actually know those because this is the God that we profess. We got to know who he is. So when you're talking to a Mormon, you can say, oh, that's not who I believe in. I believe this. Basic things. All right, so A.W. Tozer has a great quote on this. He is a wonderful evangelist of the last century. And he says, it's not a cheerful thought that millions of us who live in a land of Bibles, who belong to churches and labor to promote the Christian religion, may yet pass our whole life on this earth without once having thought or tried to think seriously about the being of God. We in America have been given much. We have access to so many resources. You can go right out there and purchase resources to know what you believe and why you believe it. I mean, today, not everybody has access like that in the world. We are responsible to use those resources. If you can't afford a book today and you have internet access, you can find resources immediately on your phone even. We live in an amazing time of a wealth of knowledge. We are responsible to use that knowledge. All right, so back to my atheist who write this article, How to Convert Atheists. He wants you to be prepared in what you know too. He says to actually study these things that you're professing are true. Now, he kind of gets into the deep stuff, philosophy of religion, historical method, epistemology. Man, study how you know what you know, and so on. But look what he says. Study the arguments for God and present them in their best or their strongest form. Study popular atheistic arguments and be prepared to give solid, not evasive answers. He actually wants you to know what the atheist arguments are, so that when you come to him, you're not coming completely blindly to what he believes. Wow, come prepared. Okay, and then the Bible has several verses that tell us we should be learning about our God, learning about what we know. Proverbs 4:6-7 says that wisdom is supreme. And what I like is the translation that says, though it cost you everything you have, get an understanding. How foreign is that to Americans? We're caught up in a materialistic society. We entertain ourselves to death. We pursue material wealth. But the Bible is telling us that the pursuit of wisdom, godly wisdom, should cost, it's worth everything you have. In Hosea 4:6, the prophet's telling us that my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. How many people do you know who are in ruins because they don't know what they believe or why they believe it? And then I put some other verses up there for you. I'm not going to go all the way through them, but Ephesians 4:11 through 15. It's for the unification of the believers that we grow in knowledge. We're always striving to seek this unity. How can we be unified as believers when we don't even know our God? Okay? We got to be working towards the same goal of gaining that knowledge about God. Not just for the purpose of talking to atheists, but for the purpose of knowing what we know for the unification of the body of believers. Okay, so I've talked about knowing as the first element of dialogue. And on the next slide, right now I'm going to kind of give you an out here. Many Christians, I think, is not engaging non-Christians because, number one, they're not confident in their own faith. Well, I just covered that. We got to know what we believe. If we know what we believe, that gives us a confidence to talk to other people about what they believe. Okay? So if you know what Mormons believe, if you know those things, okay. All right, so we got to become confident in our own faith. Some of the Christians are fearful of the unknown. They wonder, what will I say? Well, the way to get through that is to do stuff. Okay? How do you get past the fear of the unknown? You do things. I'm trying to encourage women's ministry specifically to get back out there doing mission work, talking to the unbelievers. Because you'll start to know your faith when you have to defend it to someone. And then I think you're putting too much burden on yourself. You actually shouldn't be thinking you're the only one out there that has a belief. You're not. You're a Christian, but there's a lot of other beliefs out there, and we need to start holding other people accountable for what they say they believe. And that's what we're going to kind of quickly look through these. But let's get through some of the section on listen, and then I'll tell you what you need to be asking people. Okay, so there again, we have our polar bear in the snowstorm, but we're on to listen. Out of no listen, question, and respond, we're on listen. We need to really spend some time training ourselves to listen again. Okay, in all areas of our life, listening to God, but you know what? Listening to other people. Instead of just trying to answer people, part of our ministry is listening to them. Finding out where they're at in life and how they got there. That will give you a point of connection with them. You don't have to worry about coming to them with all of these facts when you just listen to where they're at. Well, you're a Buddhist? What is that? How'd you get there? So what do you believe about God? You're going to find some points of connection where you can talk to them about your beliefs if you'll listen to what they're saying. This also shows a great respect for them. It demonstrates that you are trying to find out what they actually know and not just trying to, again, get that notch in your belt of salvation, you know. Hey, I got another one. Proverbs 18:13 tells us to answer before listening is folly and shame. In fact, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the pastor from the World War II era, the Lutheran pastor said, the first service one owes to others in the community involves listening to them. Just as love to God begins with listening to his words, so the beginning of love for the brethren involves listening to them. Okay, he's talking about between each other. And of course, what I'm going to teach you today would be good for the Christian church, but also listening to those in the human community as well. Remember, we're all creation of God. We're all in the creation together. When you listen, you'll find out many people have not really thought about belief in God. You're not stepping out into a world that is deeply entrenched in the study of theology, no matter what they believe. Okay? You're not stepping out into that world. I don't know if you feel like you are, so you think you have to have this background in seminary, or you feel like you have to have all the answers when you go out there. Whereas I wish we could all have a background in seminary. We don't all have the time for that. But realize when you step out into the world, they don't have a deep study. They're not going to an atheist church every Sunday to find out why they're an atheist. Right? Okay, so you'll find this out if you'll just listen to people and while you're dialoguing with them. Many Christians are not really paying attention because they're too busy being defensive. They're too busy being defensive. And I've found that many times I shut down conversation way too early because I'm trying to get to my answer. But I'm not really hearing them. Okay? Or I get this wave of emotion because, they're attacking my Christian faith. You saw the religious antagonist. You'd probably get pretty upset, right? I think there could have been a great outcome to that video. That if we don't get defensive, that we can actually offer. My outcome to that video is I would have been, sure, let's stand here and let's talk. You get your bullhorn out, I'll get mine out. You posit something about God, you ask something about God, or you suggest something, and then I'll talk. Okay, and then we'll trade back and forth. And anybody who wants to stay around can listen to us. That'd be great. That would have been an awesome ending to that video, wouldn't it? And then we would have been listening to each other instead of shouting at each other. So from listening to people, we'll find what we can discuss. Okay, let's get on to the third element, which is questions. And this is the main thrust of what we need to be doing. Go ahead to the next slide. We need to be ready to ask about a half dozen questions. Greg Kokel, who is one of the gentlemen at Stand to Reason Ministries, wrote a book called Tactics, which I highly recommend. Tactics. It's a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. And he says, come ready to ask about a half dozen questions. And we should. We always think we need to come ready with a certain set, like the gospel presentation in a certain format or some. We also need to be ready to question those who are saying they have a belief as well. Now, I put half dozen equals 6 up there because I do a lot of talking to college students. And somebody asked me, what's a half dozen? And I said, wow, public schools. I was a public school teacher, I'm teasing. All right, so what kinds of questions are we going to ask? Let's get to those. We're going to ask why, how, and what. This is what you're seeing right now is just the reasoning behind this. As a teacher, I know a student learns better when it's there, when they own the learning, when they discover it for themselves. Rather than me lecturing at them, if they discover what's true, they'll never forget it. It's theirs. So when I'm dialoguing with somebody who's an unbeliever, I want them to own that truth for themselves. I want them to discover it, and I'm going to do that by asking them a lot of questions. Plus, this helps me avoid building a straw man. It helps me avoid telling them what they think. Okay, what questions are we going to ask? First one, why do you believe that? If you hear something about Christianity, you should ask, why do you believe that? Or if you hear something about atheism or Buddhism, simply ask the person why they believe what they believe. So basic, right? And yet it's something we don't do. We really need to be asking the world why they think what they think is true. We need to be asking them why they say that. My question I like to ask sometimes if they tell me they're an atheist, I'll say, why do you believe there is no God? Let me see you give the reasons for that. Let's go. That's fun. It's harder to do than what you think because remember, not a lot of people have actually studied this. A lot of people are just regurgitating something that they've heard from Richard Dawkins or in a movie or from Bill Maher on The View. Okay, when he said faith is a lack of critical thinking. You might hear that. He's just regurgitating Bill Maher. Rosie O'Donnell said that extremist Christians were like extremist Muslims or Islam. Okay? I've actually had somebody repeat that to me. Where are you getting that from? Why do you believe that? Okay? She was quoting Rosie O'Donnell. She's just repeating a soundbite. So we need to ask people why they believe what they're saying they believe. Next question. How do you know that? How did you come to that understanding? How do you know that's true? How have you come to this conclusion? And One of my favorite questions, what is the source of your information? I constantly hear the worship of Jesus Christ is the same thing as the worship of Horus or Osiris. He's just another dying and rising God. How about asking that person, that's an interesting thing you said. What's the source of your information? Because I know from studying this argument, it's not a very good source. They're not actually reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead or the hieroglyphics off the pyramid walls to get that. They're reading some guy that made that suggestion a while back, okay? Ask him to source it. Where are you getting that from? I'd like to go read that and find out what that guy's sources are. So how do you know that? The next one, what do you mean by that? Oh, this one is fun. This is a good life lesson. If somebody says something to you, you should just say, what do you mean by that? This has changed arguing in my marriage. Because we've been married for 18 years, so there's a lot of back history. And if he says something and I'm thinking, I know what he means because that time 5 years ago when he said the same thing, that's what he's saying it again, right? And so I just automatically get all with him. But the thing is, I can't do that anymore because I teach you to not assume what the other person is saying. So I can't assume what he's saying anymore. And I have to actually ask my husband, what do you mean by that? Because I can't assume it, right? The same thing when you're talking to somebody, if they say something about Christianity or if they say, science has disproved Christianity or something like that, you should ask them, what do you mean by that? My husband was standing in a grocery store line. Guy behind him is wearing a t-shirt that has a big white cross and a big red nose symbol through it. It says bad religion at the top. Now, if you were a child born before the 80s, it's just an 80s rock band. But my husband said, you know what? He's sending a message. I'm going to ask him, what do you mean by that? And the guy looked at him and goes, it's a band. My husband goes, I know that. It's a good band in the 80s, but what are you trying to, it says like bad religion, and you're like communicating a message there to people that Christianity is bad. So what do you mean by that? Do you actually believe that? And the guy just kept going, it's a band. And he said, I'm not making fun of him. He said it like that. It's a band. I bet that gentleman's going to think twice about wearing the shirt again, or at least he'll think about the messages he's conveying to people. Okay? This is a great question. We should be asking the world these things, especially when they attack your Christian faith. Don't assume that they actually know what they're saying. Ask them what they mean by that. Give them a chance to explain their position. Shows respect, shows love towards that person, and you'll have a better conversation with them if you just ask them some questions. Let's finish up the questions by saying maybe they'll give you an answer. You can then say, you know what, if you don't agree with them, you might say, well, have you ever considered that? Have you ever considered that mankind actually thinks there's such a thing as real good and real evil? We can't get that from evolutionary theory. There's no such thing as good or evil in just nature. Okay, so where are you getting that from? Have you ever considered that maybe good and evil are part of the moral law that's given by a moral lawgiver called God? And that it's set on every man's heart? So it's a little bit less confrontational way to get your beliefs across or to talk to people when you can say something like, have you ever considered that? Or can you help me with something? Like, I'm having a hard time with what you believe. You're saying this. Can you help me with something here? That's a good way to say it. All right, I know I've been going really, really fast. That's because our time's a little bit short here. So let's finish this section up with get the conversation started, though. That's why you need to have at least 6 questions on your mind at all times, Christians. You always need to be questioning people and why they believe what they believe. Because if you wait 10 seconds, I'm going to take 10 seconds, Mike. That's just really weird, isn't it? It's weird here, but it's weirder when you're standing there one-on-one with a person. It's almost like you're sitting there thinking, how can I get him? How can I get him, right? Okay, so you don't want to do that. You think about what you're going to be saying. Have some questions in mind before you go out as an ambassador for Christ into the world. And then the second point there says always have a few questions in mind. So just move that along on that slide. Thank you. All right. So now we're to the respond. We got to know what we believe. We really need to be listening to people a whole lot more than what we're doing. That's one of my major ones. And then question what they're, there they are. Thank you, guys. Question. I wish I could just call this whole session just question people. Question them all the time. Don't assume that you know what they're thinking. Just question them and make them support it. And then respond to them. Let's do the respond section. Show the person the problem with their statements. Yeah, that background's not working. They're trying to help out. Apparently my background didn't make it onto the slides. There we go. Show the person the problem with their statement. A lot of people are making logical fallacies on a daily basis. There are errors in reasoning. Like in political campaigns, they attack the person rather than argue the arguments. People are making these kind of errors on a daily basis. If you guys will spend a little bit of time to get familiar with what logical fallacies are, I've suggested a book. It's that little bitty print that says The Fallacy Detective. And The Fallacy Detective was written for preteens, for homeschoolers. Okay? And it's not an intimidating book, but it will teach you to recognize when people are saying things that are errors in reasoning. And then you'll start to have a lot of fun with your friends and family, right? I'm sorry, you just committed the law of non-contradiction. They'll be looking at you like, what? But what this will help do is it will help show atheists when they have an error in their reasoning. And guys, I can't tell you how important it is that we are people with good thinking skills. Because good reasoning is of God, and it leads us to the truth, and God is the truth. That's John 14:6. Bad reasoning leads us away from God. It's never going to lead us towards God. And yet, how much time are we spending to develop good reasoning skills as Christians? And I'm going to tell you from what I'm seeing out there in my debates and online interactions and one-on-one interactions, Christians seem to be the last people who are concerned with truth and with good reasoning so that we can get toward what's actually true and not just what makes us feel good. Okay? We're some of the last people to hold people accountable for actual truth. Show the person problems with their statement. The atheist was asking for that. And here's my final couple on respond. Respond to valid questions. We talked about that earlier. Demonstrate honesty. Christians, you are saying you believe in the God who created the universe, the giver of all truth. If you don't know an answer, you have to tell people, I don't know. You cannot make stuff up. You cannot make up an answer. I actually had one person at a conference in Oklahoma tell me that she had never in 30 years ever heard a Christian say, I don't know. And that was the last thing that was keeping her from coming to Christ because she couldn't trust Christ. She wasn't seeing Christ in people. Okay? She couldn't trust him. She knew, like I do, that people can't have all the answers. We're not God. So this was keeping her from coming to know the Lord and Savior. I don't know. We have to demonstrate honesty if we don't have the answers. And then be discerning. As you saw in the video, that's not a good situation, right? We can't be just yelling at each other, okay? If somebody's being belligerent, or like this guy's calling himself the religious antagonist, we need to be discerning. A person like that really may not want to hear what we have to say. So if they're not willing to interact with you, respond to your questions, listen. If they're not listening to you, if they're thinking about what they're going to say next, okay? If they're not willing to interact with your responses, then you need to plant a seed of doubt and move along. Okay? Be discerning. All right. Couple final thoughts. And then we'll get out of here. Always do this out of love and respect for mankind. The reason I'm teaching you to engage in dialogue is because we love the lost. Okay? Do not let arrogance creep in. Because as you grow in your knowledge of the defense of the faith and you see that you have the truth about this life and the life to come, you will see that the other answers fall very short. And arrogance can creep in that circumstance. So don't allow arrogance to gain a foothold. And remember that you represent the truth wherever you go. So you need to be people of integrity, honesty, love, and grace. as representing the Lord Jesus Christ. Let me pray for us. Father, I thank you so much that you are the truth, Lord. Father, I thank you that you are creator. Father, what I pray for these believers and I pray for New Mexico is that we will be emboldened in this state and in this world to go out and hold people accountable for what they believe and then lovingly interact with those beliefs, Father, so that we can show them the bankruptcy of what this world has to offer. Father, I thank you so much for giving us a mind that can think through these things and that can love people with all our heart and with all our soul and with all our mind, which is what you command us to do as far as the greatest thing the greatest commandment, Lord, is to love you with all our heart, soul, and mind. Let us love others that way as well. Father, I thank you for this time, this short time we've had together. I thank you for these people who have come, give of their time to honor you, Father, and to love those who are lost. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.